A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Welcome to another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards. It is good to have you with us. On the program today, I'm going to talk with Rick Ector from Rick's Firearm Academy of Detroit, legally armed in Detroit, a concealed carry instructor, longtime friend, who yesterday, Thursday, Lansing, Michigan, organized a rally against racism that was prompted originally by the deaths of Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor. Ahmaud Arbery in Georgia, Breonna Taylor in Louisville, Kentucky. And we talked with Rick last week. In the days since Rick organized this event, unfortunately, we had the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Since then, of course, we have seen protests, we have seen riots, we have seen fires set in Minneapolis, we have seen all kinds of turmoil erupt over the death of George Floyd. Now, this was a peaceful event in Lansing, Michigan on Thursday, but it was attended by a number, and again, this was not specifically a Second Amendment rally, but it certainly was attended by a number of individuals who are very supportive of the right to keep and bear arms, including Rick Ector, Maj Toure from Black Guns Matter, Mike Lynn Jr., local activist in Lansing. We've had Mike on the program before. He was one of the, he actually organized that armed escort for the Democrat lawmaker who said she felt intimidated and concerned after there were armed protesters who showed up at the state capitol in Lansing. Mike Lynn said, listen, we'll walk you to your office. That way you don't have to feel concerned or scared. And Mike Lynn said he also wanted to send a message that he said he kept hearing all these folks say, well, these white gun owners show up at the state capitol and nothing happens to them. What imagine what would have happened if black gun owners done the same? And Mike Lynn said, well, let's see what happens. And, the honest answer was nothing happened. Mike Lynn and several of his friends and family members provided that escort. Capitol Police didn't give any problems. And there were no issues at the rally yesterday as well. But we did have an opportunity to sit down and spend some time with my friend Rick Ector about that rally in Lansing, as well as what happens next. Take a look and a listen. Rick Ector, thank you, my friend, for being on the program today. It's so good talking with you again.
Hey, man, always a pleasure to be on the show. Always look forward to catch up with you and talk with your listening audience.
Well, and we got a lot to catch up on because we had you on last week talking about the rally that was scheduled for Thursday of this week in Lansing, Michigan at the state capitol, a rally against racism. And at the time, as you said, this was kind of prompted by the death of Ahmaud Arbery down in Georgia, Breonna Taylor in Louisville, Kentucky. And sadly, since you and I spoke last week, we've had the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis. And we've since seen, protests that have grown in some places, including Minneapolis, into riots, into looting. This was a rally against racism in Lansing yesterday. Tell me, first of all, who was there and what was the message of yesterday's event?
Well, the message is, that we entitled the event, BLAIR, Blacks and Latinos Against Racist Empowerment. We've seen the same stories here locally that everyone else around the country have seen. As you mentioned, we've seen the Ahmaud Arbery case in Georgia. We saw the Breonna Taylor case in Louisville, Kentucky. And, of course, this latest incident just happened just within a matter of days, well after, I thought that I could, approach my community here in the state of Michigan and bring together a message, man, that we can drive a lot of attention to the issue of people meeting their untimely demise. And when we're talking about the Ahmaud Arbery case in Georgia, we're talking about 3 citizens who accosted Mr. Avery, and the result of this interaction resulted in Mr. Avery being shot dead. Law enforcement wasn't involved. When you look at the Breonna Taylor situation, it highlights the whole topic of whether we should still engage or still have our law enforcement community still use no-knock warrants as a crime-solving tool. When I think about that whole concept, as a gun owner myself, I just bristle at the concept of someone barging in my house without announcing themselves. I'll be the first to tell you that Detroit, Michigan, where I live is not the safest community in the world. And I would hate for someone to come barging in through the door and then I unnecessarily delay defending myself because I want to make sure that I'm not, putting the lives of cops, in the line of fire, literally. But, and as we were planning this event over at our state capitol in Lansing, Michigan, just literally, just a couple of days before we planned our event, man, we of course had, this case with Mr. George Floyd in Minneapolis. And, it's really disappointing to see, this entire event unfold the way that it has. The 4 law enforcement officers that were involved that brought about the untimely demise of Mr. Floyd, who reportedly was handcuffed behind his back, 4 officers on top of him. And of course, the one officer applied a chokehold, using his leg against his, major artery in his neck, and then of course he died, man. And some of the local interviews that I've had, including one with, Fox 2 in Detroit, I was asked blatantly, up front, well, hey, Rick, do you believe that if, Mr. Floyd was white, all of the factors the same, do you think that he would have survived? And I said, well, man, I'll be totally honest with you. I think he probably would have survived. And yeah, I know it's a brutal statement to make, man, but when you consider, the level of interaction and the raw brutality that was exhibited against Mr. Floyd, man, I feel justified in making that response. But, the real issue is, what are we as a community? What are we as members of the state? What are we as citizens of this country going to do about it? Let march and demonstrate and lobby our government and to have them make positive change to reduce the incident level of these unfortunate incidents that occur in our community. Make sure we have better screening, better training. And you know what? As a firearms instructor and a gun right advocate, I'm going to say that if all of those things still fail, we still have a tool via the Second Amendment to be lawfully armed. That's also subject to the caveat depending on which community you live in, because we still may have some odious gun laws on the books. But if you live in a gun-friendly state, then of course embracing the Second Amendment could, as a last resort, be the difference between you surviving and you being a crime victim, whether it's by law enforcement or otherwise.
It's interesting that, and I know that the rally was not specifically a Second Amendment rally in Lansing yesterday, but there were a lot of very pro-Second Amendment advocates like yourself, Maj Toure, Mike Lynn Jr., who we've had on this program, Marcus Weldon from the Detroit area. And, it's interesting. There was a piece in USA Today, Benjamin Crump, who's the attorney for the Avery family, and I believe for Breonna Taylor's family as well, talking about self-defense for Black people. And do Black people still have the same, do they have the same right of self-defense as white Americans? Not necessarily legally, but culturally, and it gets into the idea. I think Killer Mike had a piece at website Color Lines this week where he said it's time for Black Americans to embrace the Second Amendment. And you talk about the gun laws that might be on the books in some areas that make it difficult for people to exercise their Second Amendment rights. But is there also this? Is there a cultural impression that listen, a white guy like Cam can own a gun, and no cop's going to give him a hard time if he gets pulled over and he's got his concealed carry weapon on him. But if a Black man gets pulled over, as in the case of Philando Castile, for example, bad things will happen. So it's better for me not to exercise my Second Amendment rights that theoretically I possess, because if I do, it might land me in trouble. Is that a common or a prevalent attitude, and how do we address that attitude?
I have heard that sentiment expressed by some members of my community, but my response has always been, I will still continue to embrace my Second Amendment rights to carry a gun for personal protection and self-defense, whether it's the so-called common criminal or whether it's a rogue member of a local law enforcement officer in a department that obviously has deficiencies in training or a lack of character present in a minority of its officers. I'll be the first to say that I'm glad that we have police officers who willingly put their lives on the line every day in this country, in every community from sea to shining sea, man. But you know what? We do have some obvious issues. We may have a training issue. We may have a character issue. But at the end of the day, man, I am going to implore everyone, to carry a gun.
The more, because there were gun owners at the rally yesterday in Lansing. There were black and brown men carrying guns, and there was no arrest. Right? You didn't have any problem with the Capitol Police there?
No, not at all. I mean, and I'll say this, and my hat's off to the Capitol Police here in Lansing. They were nothing but helpful, and they were present, and if any, situation came up, they've been more than helpful to make sure that, we did everything that was required of us and to actually help us put on a successful event. So my hat's off to the Michigan State Police Department, at the Capitol in Lansing, Michigan. We have not had any issues. We were allowed to lawfully assemble, to lawfully express ourselves, to say what it is that we like in the current state of affairs in our respective states and other states where unfortunate incidents have unfolded. And it's been nothing but positive. And I juxtaposition and compare this to, areas in the country where, unfortunately we've had some negative incidents, and the judicial system has yet to play out, and we're talking specifically about what happened in Minneapolis, with regards to the death of Mr. George Floyd. And I can understand the frustration that people are feeling. I totally get it. If it happened to my family member or something like that happened here in Detroit, Michigan, I would feel the same frustration and the same victimization. But at the end of the day, we still agree as a community that we're going to obey certain codes of public conduct, man. But, it's also incumbent upon local leadership, like prosecutors, to place appropriate charges, and if only for appearance sake, to give the perception that these incidents are serious and to address them in a timely fashion without violating any due process rights of the accused, whether they're members of law enforcement or not. And I think you can do all of that, reassure the community that a proper inquiry and investigation will be done, and to respect the rights of the accused. Even though a lot of times we hear a lot of facts and details that seep out into the media, you can still respect someone's right to due process, but still reassure the public that serious transgressions against our fellow men and the laws will be handled. You don't want an erosion of public trust and faith in our government to erode because we fail to act in a timely fashion.
No, absolutely right. I think at the very least, the government officials need to be held to the same standard as the rest of us. And I think there's a really good case to be made that they need to be held to a higher standard than the rest of us. And, I know that the prosecutor in Minneapolis on Thursday, I think made a big mistake. I know he walked back his comments, said he was clarifying it, but he, made these statements on Thursday afternoon that indicated that, we're still looking at the evidence, and there might be some evidence that would go against bringing charges against these officers, which I think added fuel to the fires in Minneapolis on Thursday night as well. And you're right. You can't turn the justice system into a kangaroo court and arrest people when the evidence doesn't require it or doesn't suggest that a crime was committed. But on the other hand, justice delayed is justice denied. And if there are, clear-cut evidence that points to a criminal activity, it doesn't matter. It shouldn't matter that the person is, a public official, whether law enforcement, a politician, or anything like that. And, unfortunately, I think, sometimes these cases do drag on. I mean, you look back at like the Freddie Gray case in Baltimore, Maryland. I mean, that dragged on for months, before officers were charged, and then the trial. So, this as well as I do. Marcus Weldon, who was one of the speakers there yesterday, knows this well too. The wheels of justice can grind slowly, and it sometimes it sounds very just very superficial to say, well, listen, you have to have patience. But when we're dealing with the justice system, you do have to have patience, because it is not necessarily going to be a quick response in terms of arrests or prosecutions and things of that nature.
Well, yeah, and granted, I understand and I agree with you wholeheartedly. The thing that affects the way the public views situations such as these, man, is that if what the public feels is already out in the public square of public opinion, that's 4-on-1 with a victim who is handcuffed behind his back, and you have what people feel is a chokehold that's probably illegal in a lot of departments from one coast of the country to the other, and this guy is dead, then yes, okay, we probably will agree with the business decision to relieve them of their jobs and of their positions. But there's also the perception that if you have not at least made an arrest or have at least announced charges to at least start the process, you may give certain members of the community to think that these 4 former officers are not going to face any scrutiny whatsoever, and you're making people feel like justice won't be done because the process hasn't even started in a timely fashion if they were the accused and if they were in those shoes in which those 4 former officers find themselves in. So, you can't give the people the perception that the justice system does not apply when they're victims.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely right. So you had a great turnout yesterday, and I think a very positive message. One that is definitely one that I hope does spread around the country. What is next for you now, Rick?
Well, I've received a lot of feedback from the community from all across the state, and even despite my best efforts to leverage social media to get the word out, I still managed to miss large sections of my state, man, who, had they known about it, they would have joyfully joined us and had an even bigger assembly of people of the same mind to congregate together. So yeah, I'm going to take a look at it, man, and look at involving more people in the future. And in addition, as you know from talking with you about it over the years, man, my pet project that I do every year to address the problem of women being killed and being sexually assaulted and raped and abused is also one of those issues that I champion. And with this program that I started 9 years ago, I've trained 50 women how to shoot and operate a firearm in one day in my first year. And last year, in my 8th year, I trained 814 women how to safely operate a firearm in one day. And my goal this year is to train 1,000. Of course, with the environment in which we're in with the COVID virus, and, concerns about public safety, and our governor has had our state on lockdown for, the last couple of months, notwithstanding her husband, who was free to go up north and use, the family boat, and then have the gall to complain in the public arena that he felt that he wasn't being serviced in a timely fashion and needs to throw his weight around that his wife is the governor and that he should receive special treatment. That isn't a slap in the face, but, that's also my other public project, is the free training of women with guns, if only for personal protection and self-defense. And I'm eager to get back to that project. And that will be subject to, the lessening of some of these, I feel at this stage, harsh restrictions on our movement and our ability to assemble. But, it's an interesting era that we find ourselves in. But I'm up for the challenge. One, I want to train women how to defend themselves. Two, I want to continue to push this message of empowerment amongst members of racial minorities, blacks and Hispanics, to take on the role of taking on a greater role in their personal protection. And I realize it's a full plate, man, but I'm motivated and I have a lot of helpful people who are willing to help me, and I'm going to need it, and I welcome it.
Well, God bless you, man. We appreciate everything that you're doing, Rick. And again, I can't thank you enough for coming on the program today, spending so much time with me. And I hope you have a fantastic weekend. And let's talk again soon.
Let's talk again soon, too. But I also want to let you know in a personal message, I'm not going to let you off the hook, man, because I got to get you to Motown physically, man. And you notice I've been nothing but persistent, man. We're going to have to do something. We're going to have to take Cam and Company on the road to Motown, to the great Wolverine State, man. And we're going to have to do Cam and Company here on site, man. Got to get you here, man.
All right.
It's been, well over 10 years, but I got to get you here sooner or later.
I know. If
I don't quit, it's got to happen.
All right. Listen, here's the promise I'm going to make to you right here. You ready?
Uh-huh.
So
I'm ready. I'm bracing myself.
Right.
Come on.
So next Friday, my wife has her CT scan. We'll have a much better idea, probably mid-June, what the next couple of months are going to look like in her treatment. So then I can start scheduling out my summer. The next trip that I take will be to Detroit. I give you my word.
All right.
All right. I will be there at some point this summer.
I got your word, and you put it out here in the public arena on your show. So I'm going to start publicizing. The next trip you make is going to be to Detroit.
Yes, sir. 10.5 hours from Farmville,
all
Virginia. Right. I can do it.
All right, man. Me and everyone in the Wolverine State are going to hold you to it, man. I look forward to it.
I look forward to it as well. Rick, thanks again, man. Thank you for everything you do, and we will talk again very soon. So, yes, next trip I take, Detroit, Michigan. That's the plan. Not sure when it'll be, but it'll be some point this summer. All right, let's get to today's armed citizen story, our good deed of the day, our recidivist report. We will start there. Lincoln, Nebraska. Murder suspect released from jail just 4 days before a shooting. The latest homicide in Lincoln. This from KLKN TV. Authorities arrested 30-year-old Ryan Long in Jacksonville Beach, Florida on Wednesday night in connection with the shooting death of 31-year-old Michael White Magpie, who was found around 4 o'clock in the morning of May 23rd in an alley in Lincoln with multiple gunshot wounds. Lincoln Police Chief Jeff Bleemeister said on Thursday morning that Long was stopped by Florida officers for a seatbelt violation, found with a stolen handgun in the car. Evidence suggests that Long right now is solely responsible for the fatal shooting, according to the chief. Police say they're not sure why Long was in Florida or what his motive was for killing White Magpie, but they do say that the two had known each other for several years. According to police, Long has a lengthy criminal history, including several pending felony cases. He was, according to court records, involved in an early morning rollover crash on April 23rd in Lincoln, Nebraska. Officers found Long unconscious in one of the vehicles, had to break out a window in order to pull him out. They reportedly located an open bottle of Crown Royal whiskey, some marijuana in Long's vehicle. Long denied that the alcohol was his, told officers in the hospital that he was under the influence of pain medication at the time of the crash. When asked which medications, Long reportedly said, quote, all of them. Blood test results showed that Long had a blood alcohol content of 0.196, which in some states is getting close to 3, maybe even 4 times the legal limit. He was arrested on May 15th for a third offense DUI and other charges. 4 days later, he posted 10% of his $75,000 bond. He was released from jail. The murder of White Magpie occurred 4 days later. He's also facing second-degree domestic assault charge, use of a deadly weapon to commit a felony, stemming from an incident in November of 2019 in which he allegedly shot a woman in the thigh. The woman told officers she had been assaulted by Long in the past. In October of 2019, Long allegedly took place in an assault and a robbery of a man outside of a Lincoln strip club, for which he was charged with felony robbery. In both of those cases, Long posted bond. He was released from jail. Now he's facing charges of first-degree murder as well as use of a firearm to commit a felony in connection with White Magpie's death. On to our armed citizen story of the day. Everett, Washington, where a suspected burglar fatally shot by a homeowner there in the area. Neighbors say they were surprised. This is not something that typically happens in their neighborhood. Homeowner called 911 just before 5 o'clock in the morning. This was on Thursday to report that somebody was inside his home. Officers arrived to find a critically wounded man in his 30s. Officers and medics attempted to revive the man, but pronounced him dead at the scene. According to KOMO, investigators believe the burglar broke into the home, went into a room containing firearms. The homeowner, who's a gentleman in his 70s, woke up to sounds in his home, confronted the intruder, and then shot him. Brad Miller, who lives nearby, says, quote, "That's probably what I'd do, because I'm a firearms owner too. If it happens, I'm ready to do the same thing." Victoria Moores, who works nearby, said if you have a gun normally and someone breaks into your house, you're probably going to use the gun, because if you don't, they're going to get you. Louetta Wood, who works nearby, said, "I feel sorry for the owner to have to live with this, because you don't ever want to be the one to have to pull the trigger." And listen, it is never an easy thing when one has to defend oneself against a home intruder. However, living with the fact that you were forced to defend yourself, while that's tough, I think is a much better option than family and friends and loved ones having to live with the fact that you died at the hands of a home invader. Detectives still trying to piece together what exactly happened. The police say that the investigation does continue, and right now, though, looks to be a pretty clear-cut case of self-defense. One of the police officers says that we're going to go where the evidence leads us. So we'll wait and see, but right now it looks to be a case of self-defense there in Everett, Washington. Finally, our good deed of the day from WINK News in Charlotte County, Florida, where a good Samaritan who was driving down the road near the Charlotte County, Sarasota County border noticed a woman who was being beaten in a car. And so what he did the smart thing. He followed behind. He did not try to stop the car. He did not try to, engage the suspect. But he immediately called 911 and informed 911 what's going on. He said he's beaten the crap out of her. Followed the couple's car and was, in constant contact with dispatch. Said the female stopped the car. He's trying to get her into the driver's side. He slapped her, grabbed her by the hair, drug her by the hair on the ground. Charlotte County deputies arrived 6 minutes after the driver originally called 911. They arrested William Tillis of Englewood, Florida. Deputies say after he was tased, he continued to arrest, threatening one deputy's life, attempting to kick out the barred windows of the patrol car, bashing his head against the glass partition. Chris Hall, community affairs specialist for the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office, said, quote, "This was the right thing to do." Speaking of the driver, call 911, get somebody who's better equipped to handle that situation for you. He said, if you see something and it looks wrong, do something, call somebody. So again, in the right place at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing to help protect that woman there in Florida. Don't know who this driver is, but we thank him for his very good deed. That is all the time we've got for you on this edition of Bearing Arms Cam and Company. Want to thank you for being a part of the program as always. Hope that you have a peaceful, calm weekend. We are going to be talking much more about the unrest taking place in cities around the country on Monday's Bearing Arms Cam and Company, but hopefully we'll be talking about it in the past tense by then. Don't forget, you can subscribe to Town Hall Media on YouTube or Bearing Arms Cam and Company on Apple Podcasts. That way you never miss one of these programs. We will be back Monday with another edition, but until then, be safe, be well, be free, and we'll see you soon with another edition of Bearing Arms Cam and Company.